It was incredible. One of the things we used to say was, it doesn't matter what you did before you came to Job Connections, right? Whether you were a C-level executive or not. Today, you're all making about the same amount of money.
Right, like zilch.
So you may have different levels of income or not even income anymore, but you have certain layers of wealth. But today, everybody's earning the same amount. And I think that really helped put a lot of people at ease and really made it comfortable. One of the things that we encourage people to do was get plugged in and involved as well. I found it helpful for me to get involved and plug in and help people. And we have a story of a lady who volunteered for Habitat for Humanity. And she was standing on scaffolding, putting siding up on a house. And she was partnered up with this other gentleman. And they got to talking. And he says, what do you do? What do you do? They went back and forth. And he said, I'm a CEO, and I happen to be looking for a controller. I'm looking for a CFO controller type of person. And wouldn't you know, that was her strike. That was right in her zone. She was a CFO controller, and it worked out. And she ended up getting the job through that. It's really incredible to see when people realize they're not alone, they're not an island, that there are other people in this with them. And we're all going through the same thing. Obviously, just at various levels, and some people were really hurting. It was really an incredible program that was serving the greater community. We were awarded by the city of Danville for our efforts there and what we were doing and the impact that we had on the community, and that was cool. And it was a lot of fun. It was a great, great time.
Welcome to Titans of Transition, featuring real-life stories, anecdotes, and inspiration about pivotal career moments from leaders who have been there.
Welcome again to Titans of Transition. I'm really pleased to have a longtime friend, Dean Tracy, with me. Dean is an executive career coach and recruiter that I have known for many years. Dean and I used to go to the same church together, and I think this is going to be a great conversation. He spends a lot of time with folks going through both career transitions and related life transitions, and has a ton, I think, to share, especially valuable for those who are anticipating a change or in the middle of a change or looking back at a change, all different facets of changing. Dean, welcome to Titans.
Hey, Joe. Thanks. Thanks for having me. Those were good times.
They really
Playing
were.
in the band. Yeah.
Playing in the band. Yeah, we were on the worship team in a large church in Danville, California. Dean was on percussion, standing right next to me when I was playing guitar. And we both encouraged one another to lean in a little bit more into our own growth.
Yeah, that was awesome times. Good times.
Yeah. The other thing that's interesting, and it's a good segue, Dean, is we found out later as we got to know one another, we were actually in a similar career of both IT leaders. So with that, why don't you take us into some of your journey, Dean, and transitions you made? I'd love to hear that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, when you and I met, I was an IT director for a software company in Silicon Valley, and it was pre-IPO days, and everything was great, and everything was shiny and new and exciting. And suddenly we were hit with 9/11. And when that happened, the company went sideways. My position was eliminated. And I thought there's this idea of restarting a program at our church called Job Connections. It had been around for a long time, but it faded away. And I redefined it, restarted it, relaunched it after 9/11 as a way to help bring people together with opportunities. And that's how I got into what I'm doing today. I thought I'll always be in IT. IT is never going anywhere. I'll always be in IT. And that position didn't work out. It's fine. Another one will come along. And it didn't.
Just to jump in a little bit there, obviously, if we think back to those times, how challenging they were in the job market, Job Connections was a ministry of the church there. It wasn't just a few people. You grew that. It was a large church, but I can remember going, it was Saturday mornings typically, and there'd be 100 plus people in the room. And tell us a little bit about what that was. Maybe that would be good to hear.
Yeah, Job Connections was an outreach of the church, and we met every Saturday morning from 9 to 11:30, and it was all around teaching people how to look for a job, how to write a resume, how to interview. It was a 2.5 hour program once a week, and we would have speakers come in and speak on staying motivated in your search, that kind of thing. Professional coaches. We've had athletes, we've had book authors, we've had executives and professionals come and speak on maybe what they're looking for people in their company. And it was an incredible program. We started out in January of 2002 after 9/11, and we had, I think, 8 people in our first meeting. And we were meeting in a classroom, children's classroom, sitting on small chairs. The next week we grew to 15, 17 people. The next week it grew to 30-some people. We found ourselves in the multi-use room now at the church with about 100 people every week. And it got to a point where we were having 300-400 people every Saturday morning. We had to move into the main auditorium to run this program. Yeah, it was incredible.
Didn't at a certain point this get picked up by local news or something? I remember something like that come up.
Well, every year we had what was called the Career and Leadership Summit, where it was a once-a-year big event where we would have amazing speakers come in. We've had Patrick Lencioni, we've had Roger Crawford. Roger Crawford is a great man out of Sacramento. That was our once-a-year big event that the news usually posted about or ran a story on. We were also on 60 Minutes. And I think that might be what you're talking about.
Yes. Where
Scott Pelley and the crew came out and were talking about job connections and people in transition. And at the time, it was around unemployment being at the 52-week program and then the extension of unemployment. He was talking to people about that. The whole segment on 60 Minutes that night was around employment, unemployment, staying connected, job connections, that kind of thing. It was really cool. Yeah.
So that's also, you went from being an IT executive, senior leader, stood this outreach up or strengthened it. It grew. That then started a transitional journey for you into your current career.
It did. As an IT leader, I thought I was secure and everything was great. And then when this happened, it forced me really to understand my passion. And when you think about being an IT leader, it's not a job, it's a lifestyle because you're always on. You're always on. When I went into Job Connections and started running that program, I realized that was really a lifestyle because my whole philosophy and me and the way that I'm wired is to serve and to be a servant and to help others. And so I was really intentional about designing the program as an outreach to the greater community, not just an in-reach for people in the church. Oftentimes, too many churches have programs where they're cut off to outsiders, right? So we turned it into an outreach as opposed to an in-reach. And it was through that program that I really developed my passion for helping people. And to see the impact that my little role had on the lives of these families, because you're not just impacting the individual that's looking for a job, you're impacting the whole family. And it really has developed into a passion for me. And running that program got attention from big companies like Mervyn's and Sephora and some other big companies. And people in the program were getting jobs at these companies. Then they would call back and say, we're looking to hire people. And I found it being really a full-time job for me. That was full-time but unpaid, right? Mm-hmm. As a volunteer. But that was okay with me because we were at a point, it was all about not necessarily worrying about the income, but worrying more about the outcome of what we were doing. And it was through that we were able to help people get jobs. And then I started helping people with the resumes and everything else, and it just grew into an opportunity for me to really become a servant and just show love to people and help them walk with them into transition.
It's an interesting pairing of both doing the coaching piece and also the recruiting piece at the same time, which seems real natural because oftentimes being a coach, oftentimes people, it's hard to present your best self for a new position or even know what you should be going for without someone to come alongside who is more invested in you over the longer term than a typical recruiting engagement might have.
It was an interesting time, and it was a lot of fun. Well, and we grew that program. We had at one point about 70 volunteers, and our annual events would have up to 1,500 people on one Saturday. So the impact that it had on the bigger community was really substantial.
I remember attending some of those meetings, and something that might be interesting to folks listening in was the Danville area in California, East Bay. There was a lot of affluence there, but there was people that came from all walks of life, all different career paths into those sessions, but they had a common need at the time. And so it just was very interesting. And I recall we used to have breakout tables to interact in between talks and things of that nature, getting to know other people. And I hadn't even thought about this, but maybe this might have been my first seed planted in my mind about transitions. And everyone had transitions they were going through. Most of the people in the room, I think it'd be fair to say, had transitions thrust upon them.
Yeah.
Versus them choosing it. Similar to your story, where the company had gone through a major riff or something like that. And now they thought they were completely safe, but now they were out on the street, as it were, and put shoulder to shoulder with people, very different walks of life, different careers.
Oh, it was incredible. And one of the things we used to say was, it doesn't matter what you did before you came to Job Connections, right? Whether you were a C-level executive or not. Today, you're all making about the same amount of money. So you may have different levels of income or not even income anymore, but you have certain layers of wealth. But today, everybody's earning the same amount. And I think that really helped put a lot of people at ease and really made it comfortable. One of the things that we encouraged people to do was get plugged in and involved as well. I found it helpful for me to get involved and plug in and help people. And we have a story of a lady who volunteered for Habitat for Humanity. And she was standing on scaffolding, putting siding up on a house. And she was partnered up with this other gentleman. And they got to talking. And he says, well, what do you do? What do you do? They went back and forth. And he said, I'm a CEO, and I happen to be looking for a controller. I'm looking for a CFO controller type of person. And wouldn't you know, that was her strikes. That was right in her zone. She was a CFO controller, and it worked out. And she ended up getting the job through that. But it's really incredible to see when people realize they're not alone, right? They're not an island, that there are other people in this with them. And we're all going through the same thing. Obviously, just at various levels. And some people were really hurting. And the church, thankfully, was in a position to be able to help many folks through that financially. It was really an incredible program that was serving the greater community. We were awarded by the city of Danville for our efforts there and what we were doing and the impact that we had on the community, and that was cool. And it was a lot of fun. It was a great time.
And it was an opening of this path. And so the other thing that I think is interesting to explore is that, you do all of this coaching and recruiting support. You can do a lot of that remotely. And you've had a number of moves, and I think the moves have been driven by something that's going on parallel with you and your wife, Denise. They share together, and that is Tracy Akers. And so we have these at least two tracks. I'm sure there's more, but these two tracks going on. Why don't you tell us a little about your love for horses, when it originally developed, and take us down into that?
Well, I had horses when Denise and I met 42 years ago, and we just celebrated this year 40 years of marriage, which is pretty cool. Okay. And we actually had a horse and buggy take us from the church to the reception on our wedding day, and through downtown Arcadia in Southern California. And we just had this passion for horses, and it just grew with us as a family. And our kids grew up with horses, and it got to a point where we thought, well, horses, we're paying for them to be at a facility. Our kids were all grown and gone. Not gone, but out of the house. And Denise said, we're at a point in our lives where we should have the horses in our backyard. So that's what we did. And we found a property, got the horses in our backyard, and we had plenty of room. We had a big barn and everything we had an acreage and whatnot. And Denise got plugged into the horse community, if you will, and learned of a rescue in Southern California. It was rescuing horses. And what will happen is rescues will go to an auction, they'll buy a horse from auction, they'll rehabilitate it, and then adopt it out. So if you wanted to buy a horse for your kids, you could go to a rescue, and they're well trained and they're vetted and they've got all their shots and everything's great with them.
Hold on. Most people are familiar with dog rescues.
Right. So you could go and you buy one from a rescue, and it's an adoption fee, of course. And one of the things is they would rescue blind horses. And who wants to adopt a blind horse? And that's how it started for us, was they said, we've got this blind horse that we can't adopt out. He's still a great horse. We don't know what to do with him. And Denise, being Denise, raised her hand and said, we'll take him. So we drove to Southern California, picked him up, and brought him home. And then we got a phone call from a lady who said, I bought a horse and he's blind, and our vet says we shouldn't keep him on our property. Would you take him? We said, sure, we'll take him. So she brought him down to our ranch. We got a call from another lady who said, I'm dying of terminal cancer. I've got a miniature horse that's blind. Would you take him? So we suddenly became this facility in Northern California that manages blind horses. And what an amazing journey it's been. These horses.
For blind horses, Dean.
Well, all the horses, the blind ones, and we have 7 now that are with us. And all of the blind horses have a companion horse. Because in the wild, horses are the prey, they're not the predator. So they're always on high alert, and they only sleep a few hours in a 24-hour period. And when they're blind, they really stress out. So every blind horse has a companion horse. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be a horse. It could be a goat. It could be just anything that makes them feel comfortable and protected. In a number of cases, what Denise did was she sewed jingle bells on bell boots. So horses, when they're in competition, they'll wear these rubber bell boots over their hooves. And so Denise sewed jingle bells on the bell hooves for the horse, bell boots for the horse. So the blind horse could hear where the seeing horse was and would always know that he was safe. And the horses now, they sense each other, they smell each other, they know their companion horse, they're paired up, they're bonded, and it's really pretty incredible.
They just bond naturally. The companion horses are going along with this.
They go along with it. And it was all through this that we thought, man, this was what an amazing venture. And we launched Tracy Acres Equine Sanctuary. And it's a forever home, forever loving home for horses with special needs. And we don't adopt them out. This is their last stop. They come here until they're called home. And we have horses that came to us through animal control that they might have confiscated due to neglect or abuse. We have some that were abused in the rodeo. We have one that came to us with cigarette burns all over his face. We have several that are blind, and they all have a story. But like rescue dogs, they know they've been rescued. These horses know that they're loved. They know that we're not going to expect anything more than what they're capable of. We don't put them in parades. We don't ride them around town. We're not barrel racing with them. We're loving on them. We're keeping them fat and hungry and fed. Not hungry, but fed. And they're really amazing animals. And we've had people with special needs use some of our horses for therapy. And when you think about it, a horse, people say, just relax. The horse knows when you're stressed out. The horse knows when you're stressed. They can feel or smell your pain or your stress. And what people don't realize is a horse can hear your heartbeat up to 4 feet away. So as you're approaching a horse, they know if you're calm. They know if you're not calm. They know if you're anxious. And they're just mirroring your behavior or your vibe, if you will. And we've seen soldiers with PTSD work with our horses, and kids with autism have come out and worked with and played with some of our horses. It's really turned into a ministry for us.
So that's interesting. I'm sure that there is folks just going to seem, I'm going to say normal. I don't mean to disparage the horses, but they're blind. Do you think there's something unique there when it comes to these folks who need this kind of support?
I think the individual, one of the horses that we had was Cupid. Cupid we got when he was 3 months old. And Cupid had a big tumor that was on his chest when he was born in Southern California. And the vet there didn't know what to do. They didn't know what to do with him. They didn't know how to treat him. They didn't know what it was. And they were going to put him down. And they called us. They heard about us and called us and asked if we'd be willing to take him. So we did. And we brought Cupid up. And we actually transported him directly from Southern California to UC Davis. And we made arrangements with UC Davis, which, by the way, is an amazing #1 large animal hospital in the world. And they performed surgery on Cupid to remove this tumor when he was 3 months old. And we would take Cupid out to kids' camps and schools and introduce him and socialize him out in the greater community. And kids would talk about their grandparents having cancer. And we didn't know what this tumor was with Cupid. In fact, they thought it was a second heart. And that's what complicated things. They thought it was a second heart. But they removed it and they biopsied it. And they still don't know what it is. But when you see Cupid show up at a kid's camp and he's got this 18-inch, maybe not 18-inch gash on his chest and stitched up. And he would wear T-shirts to protect it. And we wrapped it and everything. And we didn't take him out while it was bloody and open. But when it was healed and the kids could see the scar on his chest, and they would talk about how their parents or the grandparents or their neighbor or somebody in their family might have had cancer. And now they have a scar too. And so for us, the message was, look, you can get through it. Cupid's a perfect example. They removed this tumor from him. Thankfully, it wasn't cancerous. And he's a thriving horse. And we're probably next year, we'll put him under a saddle and get him to a place where we can ride him. But he's just an incredible horse. Now, there's nothing wrong with Cupid. Now, earlier I said we've taken horses that have special needs. Well, he had a special need. He was going to be put down and needed the surgery. He ended up being our horse. And he's an incredibly beautiful Appaloosa horse and just an amazing animal. So the connection between the individual and the horse, especially when you're working with kids, they see it, they sense it, they feel it. And the horses, I think they've got an intuitive mind, and they're always thinking. And I think they sense it as well. You know, when they work with somebody with special needs, I think they know it. And these horses, I think they all realize it, much like a dog. When you get a dog and it realizes rescue dogs are different than other dogs, right? They know that they've been saved. And these horses, I think they know that they've been saved. And they come to us, they love us, we get to love on them, the people get to love on them. And even the one with cigarette burns. For a while, he wouldn't let anybody go around his face or his head. Now he loves to be brushed and petted. And he's an incredible horse.
Yeah, and you have horses of all sizes. You have many stories, I know, and I will put in the show notes how to go view some of the videos you had or get to your website. But the one that I have been tracking on recently is this enormous horse. Is it King?
King. Yeah. And King is a Percheron. Mm-hmm.
He's gigantic.
King I think he's just over 19 hands tall. And when you measure a horse, you do it by hand, and it's about one hand is about 4 inches. So you figure 19 hands tall. When he stands proper, with his head up and everything, the top of his head, I'm guessing, is probably close to 9 feet. I can't reach the top of his head. If I stand next to him, I can't look over his back. I'm looking at the center line of his ribs almost. King's hooves are 10 inches round. That's how big he is. Think about the dinner plate or the breakfast you had.
Amazing.
The dinner plate is 9 inches round, I think. King was a plow horse back east, used by the Amish as a plow horse. And he was bought by a family in Idaho. And when he got there, he had really bad hoof issues, and they were going to have to put him down. And my son learned about the horse and said, well, my parents have the sanctuary. Would you let him go to the sanctuary instead of putting him down? And he was 12 hours from being put down. And they had the vet scheduled and everything. And I drove up and we picked him up and brought him home and took him to UC Davis, and they got him completely healed with his hoof issue, and he's absolutely incredible. So King is about 19 hands tall, and our smallest horse is a dwarf miniature that we can actually take into, I would take him into the grocery store with a vest on. He's a service horse, and he loves peppermint candies. So we'd take him down the candy aisle, and he'd tap peppermint candies with his nose, and those are the ones we buy. And it causes quite a scene. When you pull in the parking lot of a grocery store and you let a horse out, and you walk him in the front door of the grocery store, you can imagine the scene. But Hagrid, he's 28 inches tall. So he's a tiny little, not tiny, but next to King, he's tiny.
Yeah.
But so we've got, Hagrid that's 28 inches tall, and then we've got, that goes into the grocery store and picks out his candy. And we've got King, who's about 9 feet to the top of his head. And King is actually an amazing, I ride King, and I can ride him bareback, and he's an absolute gentle giant, and it's really incredible. Yeah.
Now, I know another transition is your location. I think we can go forward to that in a minute, but getting back to the peppermint story, I do remember you posting some things about I remember a picture or a video of the horse sticking its head through the window of your home to get peppermints from Denise. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Every night before we go to bed, she would open the sliding door to the backyard, and the horses, we had some that were just loose in the backyard. And they would come and they'd stick their head in through the sliding door, and she'd give them carrots or mints or something. She absolutely spoils the horses, and they love her. I mean, they know. If I go out to the horses, they know I'm there. And if I go to them, they're fine, and they let me love on them and stuff. But when Denise goes out, they come to her, and I think they have each other trained in many ways. Whenever she goes out to see them, she's got something for them. It's a carrot, or it's a peppermint, or it's a cookie of some sort, and she just absolutely spoils them rotten, which is beautiful, because that's what they're here to be. They're here to be spoiled, and they've lived their lives. And when we recently relocated to the Midwest, so to speak, and we brought all the horses out, and the horse hauler found one of our horses. They found a brand on one of our horses, and they said, "We know this guy who trained this horse, and would you sell him?" And we said, "No, we wouldn't sell him." They said, "Name your price. I want to buy this horse." I wouldn't sell him. They said, "No amount of money." No, because look, that horse came to be with us, and we've committed to protecting that horse, and we've committed to loving on that horse, and we've committed never to let that horse go back into that environment ever again. And there's no amount of money that anybody could offer to buy one of our horses. It's just not an option. And we love them. They love us. And it's a lot of work, but it's a passion project. We absolutely love doing it. And it's really remarkable. It's had a big impact on us and our lives. And I think in many ways, the horses have changed. Certainly they've changed me, in ways that I couldn't even.
Now, I remember us talking again on the pre-call about interactions with the horses and lessons that could be gleaned from that in relationships you have with humans, with people you work with, people you manage, people that you deal with every day. And I'm just curious, is there some things you could pull out?
We haven't done this yet, but I know that there are companies that would take their management team out to a dude ranch, for example. And these, you're talking about people that have never been around horses in many cases, and they'll tell them part of learning how to be a good manager is building trust within your team. I think that's a big issue with the horses. You've got to get to a place where the horse can trust you. And if you look at corporate America, companies are amazing. People don't leave companies, they leave leaders. Right? So if you can be a good leader, you can have an exceptionally solid employee retention program. But if you're a bad leader and people don't trust you, you run a very high risk of rapid turnover. And that's the thing with horses. They've got to be able to trust you. So these companies are taking people out into these dude ranches, and they've got to get these horses that have never seen them before to trust them. Yeah, to trust them with a halter, to trust them walking, to trust lunging them, to trust riding. And I think that the power that these horses have, when you think about King Weighs 2,100 pounds. He's top of his head. You think of this 9 feet, I say 9 feet, I'm probably exaggerating, but he's 9 feet tall, 10-inch hooves, and 2,100 pounds. But he will just as soon sit in your lap and lick your cheek, and overtaking a carrot. He is just an absolute love bug. There's no aggression in this horse.
Wow.
And to see his behavior and to see his level of trust, and you think about it, even loading a horse into a horse trailer, horses panic. They don't like it. You're opening a door to a tunnel that's dark in most cases, and you're trying to get them to walk into it. You've got to get them to trust you. The horses have to trust you. They can trust you. You've got that bond. You can do anything with those guys.
That's huge. Trust.
Yeah. And we call it spa day. There's days where I'll go out and we'll trim the hooves on the horses, and we don't paint their nails, of course, but we put solution on them and treat them. So we have spa days with them, and there again, the horse has to trust you, right? The horse is standing. It's not going into a salon and dipping their hooves in salty water and letting the goldfish eat the stuff off their feet, or however they do it. You're talking about walking up to a horse, lifting its hoof, trimming it with nippers, filing it with a rasp, and expecting them just to stand there while you do it. And if you've got that level of trust with the animal, it's unbelievable what they'll let you do with them and for them and to them in many ways. Yeah.
That's a huge lesson. That's a huge lesson. Hey, listen, again, there's 2 tracks here to talk about. How can people reach you for coaching support and for recruiting support? And then Tracy Akers as well.
Yeah, so for me, I'm just at deantracy.com. My email is dean@deantracy.com. My contact information is there. Tracy Akers, Equine Sanctuary. We're on Facebook as Tracy Akers Equine Sanctuary. We have a website, although Facebook is updated more frequently with pictures and video and whatnot than Facebook is, or than the website, sorry. So you're better off finding us and seeing really what's going on day to day. Denise is posting stuff almost every day on Facebook with the horses. We have 27 horses.
And that's why, was that one of the major reasons why you moved to the Midwest to get a larger ranch? Or
it was larger, but Denise retired in February, which was good. We found this property. It was an amazing deal. It's 28.9 acres, all flat, usable property. It's in the woods. It's in a national forest, and the horses love it. They go into the woods for shade. Plenty of grazing land, and we've got a pond.
It's a real sanctuary.
So it's heaven for them. Yep.
Yeah.
It's really an incredibly beautiful place. Yeah.
Yeah, so I will just put in a personal plug for anyone in regards to Tracy Akers, that all this is being, as he says, they have a nonprofit, but any of you are familiar with horses, they are not cheap to take care of. There's a tremendous amount of supplies that are required, food, hay. They used to call them hay burners. It's not a very nice thing to say. But
and they eat a horse. Boy, they eat like a
horse. Oh, boy,
exactly.
And then all the medical and everything, it's a ministry. And so anything, if you have a passion around this, please do reach out to them. And if you're inclined, I would encourage you to help support their work. They're doing great work. And if you have a need for a top-notch recruiter and coach, I can vouch for you, Dean, completely in your care and your passion. I think one thing we just briefly touched on is the stories that it isn't just about helping someone find work. It can be transformational for families.
Yeah. So, for me, it's a relationship. It's not a transaction.
Yeah.
Because I appreciate the value and the ripple effect that it has on a family. Yeah. It's big. It's much bigger than just the individual.
So it's been a real pleasure, Dean. Thank you so much. In regards to Denise, and we look forward to hearing more about what you're doing there with Tracy Akers. And I will, as I said earlier, put information in the show notes. I do encourage everyone to reach out. Thanks again, Dean.
Great. Thank you. See you.
Hey, thanks for joining me today on Titans of Transition. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please check the show notes for additional information. Also, please like and subscribe to this channel.